Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Submitting herself to Tamlin's will results in Feyre's return to the human world. Lost in the mundane world around her, Feyre begins to search for purpose. Upon the realization that her words to Rhysand has not only killed the Better family, but has also put her fairy friends in danger, it is no surprise that Feyre decides she must return to Prythian to provide the help she was so long denied.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writings of your favorite novels.
This season, we are exploring Sarah J. Maas's most controversial novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy.
This week we're discussing chapters 29 through 32 in A Court of Thorns and Roses.
For this section, we're asking ourselves, what makes Feyre choose to fight and to go back to Prythian?
Some themes will be seen in this section. Family and the strengths and weakness it provides.
All right, so starting us off in chapter 29, we are for the first time in the human world with Feyre since her return to Prythian, and it's really mundane, for lack of a better word. One of the first things I think about when it comes to Feyre in the human world is her experience with food. On page 257, it reads, "It was an effort for me to get down my food. So much of it was the same. The meat, the bread, the vegetables, and yet it was ash in my mouth compared to what I'd consumed in Prythian."
What a snob.
Which is not who she once was, right?
No, she would take whatever she could get.
Yeah, and she would lick her plate clean, but that is not the case anymore.
Because Prythian was power, and everything that the Fae do has magic and power, but by the end of her time there, she'd given up her power. But she had given it up to the most powerful being she had met. And by coming back home, she's powerless. See what I did there? Was I reaching? Maybe not. Maybe. But being back home with the ash food is a reminder that humans are weak. And when the blight comes for them, they're not going to stand a chance. You know, their food doesn't have that special sauce in it. Every bite is, ooh, ash, like they're going to become, like they're death.
Oh, because they're all going to burn alive.
Uh-huh.
That's awful.
Right?
That is awful. I think your point is pretty well emphasized by a comment that Elain makes to Feyre at one point during this chapter. Elain remarks that Feyre looks and sounds different. When Feyre looks in the mirror after this comment, she says, "My face was still the same, but there was a glow about me, a kind of shimmering light that was nearly undetectable. I knew without a doubt that it was because of my time in Prythian, that all the magic had somehow rubbed off on me. I dreaded the day it would forever fade." I think this is a clear indication to us that her time in Prythian was really good for Feyre.
Oh, yeah.
But
she's got that glow.
She's got that glow. And it's not the love glow. It's the magic glow.
Tamlin's not that good that it lasts days later.
Yeah, right. Now that she's back in the human realm, even the thought of painting was abhorrent to her. And yes, while it's because she's away from Tamlin, I also think it's just that the human world is so bleak to her that there's nothing worth painting in the human world. We see this attitude in a couple different ways. One thing that I found really interesting was the fact that Elain remarks that Nesta did not finish the socialite season. Now, we know that that's because Nesta knows the truth about Feyre, that she's not at Aunt Ripley's. But I think also on some level, Nesta is above this world that she's been thrown into. She is like the High Fae. Feyre makes that comparison multiple times, but I think also Nesta she's above it all. And this world that her father and Elain have fallen in love with is below her.
I mean, like, Nesta's really always been above the world, always. I mean, they were powerful and rich beforehand, and now they're back to being powerful and rich, and she was above being poor, and she's above being rich. She's above it all.
I agree with you. And I think that's not what one would first expect because as we learn in later books, like she's an excellent dancer and this is her scene, but now it's not her scene anymore. Feyre also thinks to herself that the flowers in the human world pale in comparison to the spring court and that Elain would weep with joy to see the gardens in Tamlin's estate.
Okay, hear me out. This is definitely me reaching. This is also a spoiler for future books. The spring courts would make Elain cry, right? Who's in the spring courts? Lucien. Who makes her cry? Lucien. Boom. Connection.
Does he make her cry, or is it the circumstances around him that make her cry?
I mean, the fact that he won't leave her alone doesn't help.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
All things said and done, though, I think my note says, all unrealistic theories aside, in this conversation, Elain asks Feyre to go to the continent with her. That causes a really, really big revelation for Feyre. On page 256, she says, there was so much of the world that I hadn't seen, hadn't even thought about visiting, hadn't ever been able to dream about visiting. I want to note that able was italicized because she felt limited. She felt very limited to what she was allowed to think of or was even capable of thinking of. And the old Feyre is starting to come back. And this is a big contributor to that, realizing that she's never been allowed or able to see the world differently, even when she was with Tamlin.
Previously, her circumstances prevented her from doing that. Like, they were poor, they could barely eat. And then in Prythian, she had someone controlling her. I have no good segue. While the gardens in Prythian were beautiful and lush, the woods were more terrifying. So much so that now Feyre views her own woods back in the human world as kind of bland.
It's sad.
It's sad. So on page 260, it reads, "It had seemed so terrifying once, so lethal and hungry and brutal. And now it just seemed plain, ordinary."
It's kind of the same vibe when you go back to a childhood home and you're just like, I thought it was so much bigger than this.
Yes, it's the exact same thing because experience opens your eyes. And when you have something to compare it to, one is going to seem greater than the other.
Granted, the comparison here is, wow, I really thought I was going to die in these woods, but really, I was definitely going to die in the other ones.
Yeah, exactly. My last note on this is that the chapter opens with Feyre remarking that it was effortless to invent lies about what she did with the fake Aunt Ripley. The activities she describes are really unimaginative and really boring. And it was interesting to me that it was so easy to come up with these lies to tell her family because that's just how boring the human world is.
On the flip side of things, when we were talking about it, I actually look at it as her becoming more Fae. Because Lucien at one point comments that lying was an art form to the Fae. And the fact that she's not even batting an eye at how boring these lies are, she's adopted them. She is now Fae herself.
Which we discussed in our last episode upon her return to her family's estate, and which I think we're going to continue to see as we move forward. So one thing Faye must also be well known for doing is disrupting family relationships, because that's exactly what Tamlin has done.
Over and over and over again.
Over and over and over. And by sending her back, he continues to do it again. Feyre, when she left her family, it wasn't necessarily a happy or healthy family relationship that she had with her sisters and her father. And we continue to see that here. When Feyre returns, her father does not spend any time with her. He would rather count her fortune and throw her a ball and be around other people.
How Feyre handles wealth is a key to who she really is. Feyre has always wanted just enough money to be comfortable with her father and to paint. And when she went to the spring court, she was initially really disgusted with the wealth that she saw. She would always comment, "The curtains alone could feed my family for a year," or something along those lines. But we lose that disgust as she assimilates more to Tamlin. And now that she's back home and away from his influences, she starts to channel more of herself, and she's back to being that disgusted by unnecessary wealth. And later on in future books, we do get to see how she handles wealth when she's allowed to be more herself. Sorry, I also want to disrupt our entire flow that we worked very hard on and go back to a comment you said about how Tamlin keeps disrupting the Archeron family. Mm-hmm. I just popped in my head the absolute contradiction, or not contradiction, the juxtaposition between this book where he saves her family nonstop and in the next book where he single-handedly destroys them.
Oh, you're right.
He's like, he is the whole Archeron savior. He helps get the dad's leg fixed. He brings their fortune back and he keeps them safe. In the next book, he is their absolute demise.
Yep. Or
yes,
you could say that he is the catalyst for change in their family so that they can become the better versions of themselves.
Look, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think so what we're saying is Tamlin's been great to them. Everything he does has helped. I love Faye Archerons, but
it was all against their will. Like every single one of them, it was non-consensual.
He really has messed around with the entire Archeron family.
Oh yeah,
all of them. Oh damn. We work really hard on the flow of these episodes, and I really just ruined that. So pardon the transition.
So going back to disrupting of family relations thanks to Tamlin, because Nesta knows more than the rest of her family, she acts differently than they expect, and she's not as social. And this makes Elain uncomfortable when her friends come to visit. Again, information that one person has and information that's withheld from other people is what's causing this disconnect. Mm-hmm. We see that with Tamlin and Feyre. We see this here with Elain and Nesta. Because she knows something that Elain doesn't, Nesta is treating everyone else differently.
Nesta doesn't really use that to her advantage over them. You know, like she comes to Feyre pretty early on saying, "Hey, I have this bit of knowledge. We're going to talk about it now." Versus Tamlin, who uses that information for his own purposes. Do you think Tamlin knew Nesta went looking for them?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I don't think so.
A big revelation for Feyre is that Nesta went to go look for her. After she was taken by Tamlin, Nesta tells Feyre that she took all of the money that Feyre had earned from that pelt. She took it to go find her. Didn't make it. She had to turn back around. But this revelation shakes Feyre to her core. Not because you wouldn't expect it from Nesta, of all people, but her previous understanding was that Tamlin was the only person who made an effort for her, and that understanding is now gone. There are people in her family who'd be willing to fight for her, and while she may still be in love with Tamlin, her understanding of love is starting to shift. Her love of her sisters and her sister's love for her is starting to bolster her more. It's starting to seep more into her understanding of herself. Soon we're going to really see that transition of her family going from a source of burden to a source of strength.
At this juncture, this is actually only possible because, depending on how you look at it, either Tamlin failed to successfully glamour Nesta, or Nesta's will is too strong to be glamored that this could happen. If Nesta had been glamored, this couldn't happen for Feyre.
I like to think it really is pure Nesta willpower.
Oh, I'm sure it's pure Nesta willpower, but
it could have taken a turn.
Feyre could have just been complacent and stuck at home the rest of her life without going back to Prythian if Nesta hadn't been there.
Really? The hero of the story is Nesta?
Yeah. As much as people don't like her.
I think people love her now after Silver Flames.
But it took us a Court of Silver Flames for us to get
you
there.
were on Team Nesta pretty early on.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I love that woman. Because she is me. Nesta's interaction with Feyre at this point is super important, not only because she serves as a catalyst to get Feyre to go back to Prythian, but also because Feyre realizes that her family has had a different perspective of life that she never took into account before. In the early human chapters, Feyre is our narrator and we take her word as gospel, but what we're realizing now is that she can be an unreliable narrator. She even realizes, and we discussed this quote last week, when she goes back to her family's old cabin, she realizes that while she had hated the place and it felt like a prison, Elain had seen it as a shelter and a place to be safe. It's only now that Feyre, because she's experienced growth in Prythian, can see those two different perspectives. We're going to touch on that theme again with Nesta a little bit further on.
When we go into chapter 30, we must ask ourselves, who is Feyre Archeron? Well, great question that we ask ourselves. Because even when she's so lost in her own sense of identity, Feyre has a very stable core about her. And that core always creeps back in. And she always comes back to that core. When Feyre goes to the poor part of her old village, she leaves money to the people there. Despite them refusing it, she still does it. She says, actually, quote, on 261, "It was the least I couldn't do." So she's taking on responsibility to people that she considered to have been part of her community. Meanwhile, Tamlin just lets his land fall apart, and Rhys calls him out on that as a reminder. It's the same drive in her to do the right thing for other people, something that she wasn't capable or was even allowed to do because Tamlin was denying her of those opportunities. You know, that she keeps talking about doing the right thing, and that's something that Nesta had said about why she went to go get Feyre. It was the right thing to do. Side note, when Feyre, in that same sequence, Feyre sees Isaac and she passes him and he's with his new wife and she smiles broadly at his new wife. I would hate to be the wife in that moment, because here you have this finely dressed woman who has that fairy glow, who's totally hot, and you look at your husband, you're like, excuse me, that's your ex? You told me she was skin and bones, surviving in the forest, half wild. And I just want to I know they had a conversation that night.
You know, it's actually funny you say that, because I was thinking the same thing of I know Feyre in her heart meant well, but she probably just caused so much drama.
She definitely caused a huge fight. Why was she smiling at you?
Yeah.
Do you know her? I thought you said that the girl that you were with before me died or something. What the hell? Isaac?
Just as Isaac maybe is no, that wasn't the girl I slept with. Feyre still doesn't quite feel like herself. She reflects on page 263, that place inside me where all those colors and shapes and lights had come from had become still and quiet and dull. And I think that this is really important, because chapter 1 Feyre had those senses but suppressed them. She still registered light and color but would be no, I can't think about that right now. Whereas now, at this point, she's so lost, she's at her lowest, that part is completely dormant.
Unlike other moments when it's been so gone and dormant, to continue that quote, she says, "Soon, I told myself, soon I will purchase more paint and start again." We're seeing that she's going to let that old self come back, and I will fight this till my dying day. Feyre would have survived without Tamlin. She would have been heartbroken, but she would have gotten over it, and she was ready to start painting again. This is giving me, sorry, my note, not surprised. This is giving me, I'd like to be my old self again, but I'm still trying to find it.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Taylor Swift vibes. I want to read what I said. Ultimately, she would have regrouped after Tamlin would have moved on to survive, versus when she realized Tamlin was evicting her and the idea of life without him seemed to be too much. But, she's got it going on. She can get her groove back. Being able to live without him and to realize that, I think, gives her strength.
But you know what?
What?
She remembers it all too well.
Yeah. Welcome to the dark side.
So as we all do when we are trying to process trauma that's happened to us and we're trying to move on, we talk about it. And Feyre opens up to Nesta when Nesta presses her. Nesta sees Feyre for who she is and asks Feyre to teach her how to paint. So Nesta's forcing Feyre to move on. But it's not a force. It's also her being kind. It's her trying to connect with her sister. But it's also interesting that Feyre's I can't paint, but maybe one day I will. And Nesta's teach me how to paint.
Teach me how to paint. Which, Nesta did that on purpose.
I think so.
Oh my God, I just realized that. Nesta saw her sister sad and knew that would make her happy.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the sisterly love. That gave me warm feelings.
What I love about this moment is that Feyre starts to see herself in Nesta. If you remember early on in the book, anytime Feyre looked at herself in the mirror, when she looked at her eyes, she said, they weren't my eyes, they were Nesta's, they were my mother's. Well, when she looks into Nesta's eyes, she remarks, Nesta's eyes, my eyes, our mother's eyes, met mine. And it's really significant that Feyre now sees herself in Nesta and not the other way around, because before she constantly internalized the negative things Nesta was saying and identified with the negative things of Nesta rather than seeing her positive traits in Nesta.
It is fantastic how Sarah J. Maas took Nesta, a character that Feyre has associated with losing her own identity of her confinement, and Nesta's the one who goes and pushes Feyre to become more Feyre. Even at the start of this conversation, Nesta asks Feyre, why does she even bother to stay, and tells Feyre that she doesn't even think her home is there. She thinks it's somewhere else. And Nesta is now the grounding force for Feyre to become her own identity. This is when I realized that I was Team Nesta, when Nesta pulls out the chunk of wood that's been scratched by Tamlin as a reminder of what happened, and her own will is what kept her from not being glamored. And, you know, I know we're just talking about a lot of plot here, but really this is a great example of Sarah J. Maas, not character development. Like Sarah J. Maas is really developing Nesta here.
So I disagree with that point. I think Nesta's always been this way. I think that this actually epitomizes Feyre's character development because she's now capable of seeing Nesta in a light that is more true to Nesta rather than being skewed through Feyre's, survivor perspective.
That makes sense because during this whole revelation, Nesta keeps saying it wasn't right or it was the right thing to do. And, that's a very Feyre trait.
Speaking of Feyre traits, Nesta has a lot of faith in Feyre, which Feyre has faith in a lot of other people around her. And it comes up when Nesta's explaining why she hates her father. She hates her father because he let her mother die. She hates him for his human weakness and believes that Feyre is capable of more. That Feyre would fight to the death to save her High Lord.
I mean, in that conversation, she's like, I hated you too.
I glossed over that. Nesta's faith in Feyre reminds Feyre that she chose to remain weak when it comes to Tamlin and Prythian. And this ultimately is why she doesn't feel like herself, because she listened to Tamlin's orders rather than her instinct.
Just as Nesta's pointing out how their father was super weak and his lack of action and not being willing to save their family at all costs, who does that remind us of, Amy?
Oh, I wonder.
Give us a male who doesn't do anything for his people.
Lucian?
Yeah, that one. Tamlin sucks. And ultimately, Tamlin is Feyre's dad. And, you fall for guys like your dad the first time around, if they suck.
That hit a little too close to home.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So before we wrap up this chapter and go into the next section, I have a couple questions, Amy.
Okay.
For you. Do you think she realized that Tamlin hasn't done the same for her as in what her dad didn't do for his family, right? And if not, then how is this information something that does she hold on to it subconsciously? Does it impact her when she's underneath the mountain? Or does it bolster her because she feels like she needs to carry the weight for both of them? And just keeping in mind, on some level, she definitely expects Tamlin to react because when she shows up under the mountain, she's a little mildly outraged that he's not doing anything.
In the previous chapters, before their lovemaking, I think at that point, Feyre does recognize that Tamlin has done nothing. But I think actually at this moment, Feyre is so focused on herself and her identity that she's not actively thinking about how Tamlin has done nothing and comparing him to her father. I don't think that's what's going on in her head right now. I think it's more likely that because she's coming back to herself and who she knows herself to really be, as you've said before, she's looking for responsibility because that's a fundamental part of who she is. I think she's assuming the role she has assumed with her family of no one else, not that no one else is going to do anything, but I'm willing and able to solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think she's more in a rut because she was not given that opportunity. And she's searching for the opportunity. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. I get you. I feel you. Thank you for answering that. Now, let me take us to happier topics. Clare better dies. Her death is just some great writing. I mean, at this point, she hasn't died. So the kidnapping of Clare is better to say.
Yeah, so much better. Her family has died, though, at this point.
The kidnapping of better is better to say. I love when I have to explain my own jokes. No.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
So the whole story of Clare is fantastic writing, and the lead up to her has been there from the beginning. Early on when Nesta mentions Clare as her friend, and then when Feyre gives her name to Rhysand. And in previous chapters, right before this, there was a mention of a death while Feyre was passing by. Quote, on 261, chatting about some house that burned down with its family trapped inside the week before. It's so casual, you glaze over it very quickly.
Clare Better's full name, comes up in chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then Feyre uses it again in the Rhysand chapter. I don't remember what chapter number that is off the top of my head. So it's not like Feyre pulled it out of nowhere. It was in the book. It was in chapter 2. So yeah, just...
It's great, fantastic. But Clare has more purpose than just being plot. Oh, I guess she is plot.
She's a plot device.
She's a plot device. But... she's a plot device that gets Feyre moving. This is actually what triggers Feyre to go save everyone. It's not Tamlin. Oh, I miss Tamlin. I feel like I did something wrong. I should go check in on Tamlin. It's on 270, Feyre says, I had to get answers, had to know if it had been a coincidence or if I might be able to save Clare. She's not going to, granted, she doesn't know she has to save Tamlin, but I think she also knows that she left things pretty precariously. And that's a spark that gets her moving because, what does Nesta say? It's the right thing to do.
And at this point, Feyre knows or acknowledges that she's really stopped being a hunter, stopped being true to her instincts, and that she has to strike a balance between the thriving Feyre and the hunter Feyre. On page 268, she thinks, I'd known he was in trouble, and yet I'd stopped looking for answers, stopped fighting it, glad, so selfishly glad to be able to set down that savage, wild part of me. I hadn't tried harder to piece together the information I'd gathered about the Blight or Amarantha. So now that she's aware that she abandoned her hunter self and needs to bring that self back in, she also has to acknowledge that she's viewed her family from a skewed perspective because thriving Feyre has been able to see the world in a different light. And by bringing back hunter Feyre, she can't readopt her skewed perspective.
Additionally, this revelation is so big for her. It's what we've been harping on her for chapters at this point, and now she's come to that realization all on her own, not because of her love for Tamlin, but again, because of her love for Nesta. Nesta's the one that really points out to Feyre that Feyre could have done more to figure things out.
So Nesta specifically says on page 271, Father once told you to never come back, and I'm telling you now, we can take care of ourselves. And Feyre thinks, once I might have thought it was an insult, but now I understood what a gift she was offering me. And again, when Nesta makes a different remark later on, Feyre thinks, that wasn't an insult either, a question from a coolly calculating mind.
When you have to keep reminding yourself that they're not insulting you.
That's because Feyre has had so little time being able to view her family from an unbiased perspective. And she's trying to figure out that balance right now. What's sad to me, though, is that this is coming as she's saying goodbye. And note, her father is once again absent at her departure when he has finally remembered the truth. And my note says, men are constantly absent in Feyre's life.
Ooh.
And I really think that, like, she doesn't need men to be true to herself.
Oh, the truth bombs are here. Amy is dropping them left and right.
Well, and think about it, because, spoiler alert, Feyre ends up with Rhysand. She doesn't end up with Rhysand until she's reached that point of balance in her life.
Oh, and she is a fighter at that point, like more than now.
Right. And I think that's significant. She didn't need Rhysand to get there. She was able to do it on her own, and she had to do it on her own.
This whole goodbye is so important to the story and to Feyre because this is the third goodbye that we've seen in this book. Remember, we had the initial one when Tamlin took her. We have her saying goodbye to Tamlin, and now her saying goodbye to her family once again. And out of all of the goodbyes, this is probably the most honest one and the one that's actually filled with love. Elain's crying. Nesta's giving her freedom. Their father has abandoned them. That's fine. Douche move. And it's a power of sisters. It's that sisterly love, that bond. And that's what gives Feyre permission to open up for her love for Tamlin. And she's a lot more open to saying that she loves Tamlin going forward now, right? Because now she's finally learned what being open about love is, because for the first time, that's what her sisters are doing. And this sisterly love in this moment goes from being, like I said before, Feyre's burden to her strength. And that is a huge driver, not just for this book, but all the other books to come, is Feyre loving her sisters and wanting to do right by them. Also, note in here, Nesta saying that she doesn't think that she'd be particularly fond of the fairy world is the most perfect setup to her conflict later on in everything else that comes after this. So chef's kiss.
Mwah. As Feyre finally makes it back to Tamlin's estate in Prythian, I want to bring us back to episode 1 when I talked about a recurring image of the busted door.
Yes.
As you will remember, when the creditors beat up Feyre's father, they busted down the door. When Tamlin came to take Feyre away to Prythian, he busted down the door. And as Feyre gets to the spring court, she sees that the manor's front door is also busted open. The quote specifically says, "My stomach dropped further when I beheld the wide open front doors. One of them hung at an angle, ripped off its top hinge." And if you remember, this image of a door being broken open signals the end of a chapter in Feyre's life. And so here what we're seeing is an image that tells us Feyre's peaceful life with Tamlin at the Spring Court is over.
It does signify her chapter ending, chapter beginning. And the first line of this chapter, it just gives me chills every time.
Which chapter is that?
Chapter 32.
Okay.
On page 275, I gave myself a minute. Just 1 minute, to kneel in the remnants of the entry hall. Hunter Feyre is back.
She is back in full gear. She's able to call on those instincts in crisis because she's begun to reclaim her identity. Another forest, I told myself, another set of tracks. Slowly, I moved across the floor, tracing the information left.
Oh, she's so cool.
She's back, and she acknowledges that she suppressed her desires in the past, and even though she's brought back the hunter, she is now being more true to herself and those desires.
And while Feyre is being true to herself, the truth around her starts to blur, particularly her truth with Tamlin. I would argue that in this instance, we're starting to realize that Tamlin's identity is really getting lost. As Feyre is surveying the damage to the house, she comes across the dining room, and she can't tell if that damage there was caused by Tamlin during his temper tantrum or if the enemy caused it. The fact that she can't tell what's his and what's theirs, I think is troubling.
It is, because I think it's just one of those red flags that we've been seeing for Tamlin all along.
But now that Hunter Feyre is back, those flags started flying.
Yes, she sees them more clearly now. What I love about this particular scene is that, as you said, the place is in ruins. Mm-hmm. We don't know if it's Tamlin. We don't know if it's the enemy. Feyre finds Alis there, gathering food to take to her nephews, which, remember, food is power, is important, but that's actually not what I'm all about today. Alis is straightening the room as she tells Feyre the truth about Amarantha and the curse and what is going to happen to Tamlin. This whole straightening of the room is super symbolic of Feyre straightening herself out and her priorities as she's finally given all the information to make an informed decision. So what really set this off for me is a quote on page 283. It reads, "Alis stooped to gather up a butter knife, twisted and bent, and carefully straightened out the blade." So this takes place in between a bunch of dialogue as Alis is describing Amarantha and the curse, etc., in the history. And I thought, why? This is not important. Like, why would Sarah J. Maas put this here? But it is important because the truth has been twisted and bent. And now Alis is finally straightening it out for Feyre. So Feyre finally has knowledge and truth. And together, Alis and Feyre lift the table in the dining room back into place.
I love this so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. I also feel like it shows just a very grounding moment. It's something that, when people are stressed, they tidy up. Not all, but some. And it's bringing Feyre back to a moment of grounding and simple tasks. Plus, it sets Feyre up to literally clean everyone else's mess.
Because that's what she's good at.
Yeah, she really is.
And she's been denied that opportunity for too long.
Can we please give Feyre more messes to clean?
So as Feyre is learning the truth, she gets upset. And she thinks to herself, Amarantha had taken everything I wanted, everything I finally dared desire. And I think that that's really telling that Feyre is going under the mountain, not because of her love for Tamlin, though I'm sure that's part of it, but because she found happiness at the Spring Court and she has earned that happiness and it was taken away from her. When she finally understands the full extent of the curse and Tamlin and Amarantha, she still desires that happiness. And I think that it's important that she doesn't walk away from it.
Spicy. I love that. I love it. She's fighting for herself more than she's fighting for Tamlin.
So speaking of Amarantha, Amarantha is powerful. She's someone to be feared, as Alis describes. And if you'll remember, I always talk about how food is power. And Amarantha, you'll notice, treats everyone like food. Amarantha is described to have butchered her own slaves, as well as butchered the rebellious High Lords. She also took the High Lords' powers from where they originated inside their bodies, plucked them out as if she were taking an apple from its branch.
Oh my God, I love it.
Amarantha is also very elitist. And just like humans, Fae have stratification. They have tiers of, I don't know that greatness is the right word, but importance. And Amarantha views creatures like Alis to be killed for sport, just like humans view deers and bears as game to be killed. Alis perpetuates that view by telling Feyre she was blind and that she will just make things worse.
You're only going to make things worse, Feyre. Go away. Yes, Feyre is blind because she is holding on to her image of Tamlin for dear life. On page 281, Tamlin had once said to me that he would fight to protect someone's freedom, that he would never allow slavery. Had it been solely because of his shame for his own legacy, or because he come to somehow know what it was like to be enslaved? My note here, he did nothing, Feyre, to fight for his people to not be enslaved. Okay, you know this, I know this. And slowly the realization will start to sink in, and Tamlin's true nature will come out. Stop thinking that he's deeper than he is.
I think on some subconscious level, Feyre is already starting to realize this. So when Alice is describing the history of Lucian's eye being removed by Amarantha and Lucian being sent back to Tamlin, she tells Feyre that Amarantha sent Lucian back so bloody that Tamlin, the High Lord, vomited when he saw his friend. Note that here, Alice has to correct herself. She is too informal by addressing Tamlin by his name and corrects herself to call him the High Lord. And I think subconsciously, she also doesn't have respect for Tamlin, and I think this mirrors Feyre's wavering respect for Tamlin as well.
I never noticed that Tamlin threw up when he saw Lucian like that. I'm very curious to that scene. I would love to see it played out.
Yeah, I would be too, but it is significant. Like, it's not often that fairies are described as doing something so debasing as vomiting. Lucian does it when the mutilated fairy is sent back by Amarantha, and Tamlin does it when Lucian is sent back mutilated.
You know, Tamlin really doesn't have the stomach for war.
He doesn't.
Like, your friend comes back with a missing eye, all right? Like, Rhysand lost half of his friends. Come on, man. Going back to the curse, what gets this curse going? I would like to remind everyone here, Tamlin says that he would rather sleep with a human, nay, marry a human before touching Amarantha. Not only, I mean, yes, obviously I'm going to say that Tamlin's a douche here, but I think it gives us great hindsight to earlier chapters that he was just as disgusted with Feyre as she was with him. So, you know, we kind of imagine Tamlin as a desperate Fey lord trying to get a human to fall for him, but in actuality, like he's not into humans, not his preference.
I guess it makes sense why Tamlin at this point lied to Feyre about the treaty, and Feyre definitely rationalizes it, but I think she should be mad. I would be mad that I was lied to about a condition that took me away from my family. And instead, she just pities him for sending out Andrus to be killed.
Again, this was a murder that he caused, and it haunts her. You know, that she never goes back and mentions it, but it really is a huge part of her development, and it, you know, something that she holds on to. I feel like, you know, I would love to see the scene where Feyre says, hey, man, you set me up to kill someone.
But they never talk about it. And this is really setting up their dynamic after the events of Under the Mountain and at the start of the next book, that they lie to each other, they do things to each other that is traumatizing, and they don't talk about it. Just to continue on that warped nature, Tamlin's attitude about the curse is really warped. He's too noble to do anything for 49 years, and as the curse is coming to its end, his court begs him to do something, and so, okay, he's willing to sacrifice a few lives to save the majority, but then he's too cowardly to follow through when Feyre's there and obviously in love with him.
How do you think Andrus feels being dead on the other side, saying, seriously, you're going to let my death go to waste because you can't sha-la-la-la kiss the girl?
I'm going to have that song in my head the rest of the night.
I'd be so pissed off as if I was Andrus. Be like, you couldn't try a little bit, just try. But for this curse, Amy, did you notice how weird this curse was? How oddly specific this curse was?
It seems rather convenient.
Okay, we find out what the curse is, and I break it down part by part. Number 1 to the curse. He needed to find a human girl willing to marry him. All right, that's fair. That's like, you know, a little easy. Children of the Fae will sign up any day. So the human girl must have ice in her heart and hatred for our kind. Plenty of humans hate him. Again, sure, that's a little hard. That's easy to do. A human girl willing to kill a fairy. All right, a little excessive there, Amarantha, but, you know, I get it. You've now made it a hard thing to do. We can stop there. The fairy she killed had to be one of his men sent across the wall by him. My note, now this seems a bit excessive. Additionally, the girl could only be brought to the court if she killed one of his men in an unprovoked attack. Really? Sarah J. Maas, this feels a little too on the nose. This is a little too specific. Why couldn't she just kill any fairy? And he goes and gets there, but okay. And she had to kill him for hatred alone. So that was a very specific checklist to go through.
Well,
don't you think it was very specific? Come on.
It's very specific. It's very convenient. But we also know Amarantha sets up people to fail.
Yeah. I mean, again, it had to be super specific and on the nose because that's the whole point of the plot. But it just, every time it happens, Amarantha would have killed me. I would have smart ass right back. I'm like, really? That's okay. Do you want to make it where she's a redhead too? But all right. So rather than having so many things to have to be checkmarked for Tamlin to do, I feel like the story would have been a lot more impactful if they weren't looking for a girl who had killed his friend. I actually feel like if Feyre had killed him without having needed to for the curse, it would have made it that much harder for Tamlin to forgive her as well. And we would have added an extra layer of, complexity to it. But that's just me. That's my preference. I have a funny note here. When Alice is telling Feyre how Tamlin sent his men to go find themselves a human to kill them, sometimes they would come back and, quote on 284, Tamlin's bond with them as their lord and master told them that they have been killed by others. Human, hunter, older women perhaps. And I have, Tamlin, what is wrong with older women? Like, he just throws them out like, oh, sorry, we can't have a hunter or older women in here. It's like he's added an age range as if this is Tinder and he has a preference and he's allowed to have a preference. And if your people are in trouble, then you can take those cougars on. And also, it is a damn privilege, Tamlin, for you to be with a baddie cougar.
Yeah, that's the first time I'm hearing this note. It's weird because, as you mentioned earlier, he has as much disgust for Feyre as she has for him. And so it's like, you weren't going to be into the woman regardless, so why does age matter?
It's just such a specific thing. Like, do you think he told them, like, you must bring me back any woman who's willing to kill you, so long as she's under 30. We wouldn't make the cut. So long as, she's like kind of fit or, I'll accept blondes and brunettes. Like, come on, Tamlin.
Yeah,
no preference is allowed here.
When you're 500 years old, you don't get a preference
You're
anymore.
older than any of the women that are brought back to you. All right. This is definitely turned into a Tamlin bashing podcast, which I don't think anyone's mad about. But the whole point of a literary analysis is that you don't just pick and choose the words and parts of the story for your own support. You have to examine the parts that challenge your thesis. So here I'll bring up a quote from 286. He thought that if a human girl loved true, then bringing her here to free him was another form of slavery. And this is Alice explaining why Tamlin resisted it so much and why he did not like it, is because he felt like it was a source of slavery.
I can see that being true. We've seen Tamlin really get moody when anything is brought up about his father and his brothers and how they were with humans. He's really afraid of being like them and being as cruel as they were. For that reason, I do think he has compassion in his heart. I also think he needs therapy because he doesn't want to recreate those mistakes. And it makes sense because there's never been a free human in Prythian. Humans were only slaves in Prythian. So although the line of thinking might not be reasonable to us, I can see how it's reasonable to him.
Yeah. The amount of characters in this book that need therapy.
Every single one of them.
If I took a shot with every character, if I ate a cookie with every character, let's do something I actually enjoy. No, good point. I mean, those are all very good points. And okay, yes, he didn't want to bring back someone. He didn't want to be his father. But at a certain point, he did bring Feyre back and they did fall in love for each other. And I have zero doubt in my mind that Tamlin knew that Feyre loved him. And, I thought we can definitely try to play up the old trope of she's too good for me. She'll never love me. But I don't think that's Tamlin. And he chooses to not pursue it. He chooses to not get her to say it. They were into each other and he was comfortable biting her neck. He was comfortable being aggressive with her, but he wasn't comfortable wooing her, like taking her on a date. Why, Amy, do you think he did not pursue that actual aspect of love when he was willing to pursue other more carnal aspects?
Something that you just said sparked my answer. He is willing to pursue her physically and be aggressive with her physically, but he's afraid of emotional vulnerability, especially when their entire interaction and their relationship has been built upon a lie. as we know now, the treaty never existed, or the treaty exists, but the clauses that Tamlin used to bring Feyre to Prythian don't exist. And so from that basic first interaction until now, they're just fueled by lies. And I would be terrified to initiate a relationship with someone that I've been lying to the whole time.
Yeah, fair. Look at that. We're giving Tamlin a break. Not a big one. Slight. We'll move past it.
Yeah. Wait till next week. We'll do more Tamlin bashing.
What do you mean wait till next week? Wait till like another 30 seconds from now.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So what's sad here is that because Tamlin wasn't honest, Feyre feels like she's the one to blame. So she feels now at this point that by not being honest about her feelings for Tamlin, she's damned everyone. She's damned Tamlin and Lucien and the entire Spring Court. And she even thinks to herself, I had failed them, and in doing so, I damned them all. I damned each and every person on this estate, damned Prythian itself. The irony here, though, is that because Tamlin's been withholding information from her the whole time, he's the one not being honest, and therefore he's damned her and damned everyone else.
Yep. Of course she feels guilty, and welcome to this next section, which I like to call Fuck Off Alice. I'm going to read you a couple quotes, and then I will rant. On page 281, you could have been the one to stop her, had you not been so blind to your own heart, human, she spat. Very rude, unnecessary. And on page 286, you could have broken it. Alice snarled, those sharp teeth mere inches from my face. All you had to do was say that you loved him with your whole useless human heart, and his power would have been freed, you stupid, stupid girl. Oh, so harsh. Every time I read that, it makes me so angry how guttural a reaction Alice has to her and just how angry. And of course, I think that it's fair to say that she's taking it out on Feyre because she can't take it out on Tamlin. Because, you know, I think it's fair to say that maybe Alice realizes this is also a Tamlin issue, or maybe Alice is just a bitch. But ultimately, how is this Feyre's fault? And worst of all, Feyre actually feels this guilt so completely that she goes forward with this internalized weight just on her shoulders and her stomach everywhere.
And we're going to see that play out through the rest of the book, how this guilt compounds and compounds and compounds and prepares us for how traumatized and broken Feyre is at the start of the second book of the series. And that wraps up chapter 32. So now we have breadcrumbs.
Take it away, Amy.
So like with last week's episode, we have a lot of references to Nesta's Fae future. She's described as beautiful, imperious, still as one of the High Fae. And there was no limits to what Nesta might do, what she might make of herself once she found a place to call her own. I prayed I would be lucky enough to someday see it.
You will.
Ugh, I get goosebumps every time because I love my girl, Nesta.
Yeah, and it does take Nesta quite a bit of time to get to that place.
It does. It does. She has a lot of growing to do. We also have Feyre's death foreshadowed here on page 288. Alice says to Feyre, you can't go under the mountain. No human who goes in ever comes out. It's suicide. She'll kill you even if you get close enough to see her.
And she's right. No human does come out.
Because Feyre is not human when she gets out.
Every time you point that out, like full body chills. I love it.
And last but not least, this is one of my favorite quotes and breadcrumbs, and it sets us up for my discussion for next week's episode, so don't forget this. Feyre remarks that she doesn't believe in the cauldron, but ironically, she will have several encounters with it in the future. She specifically says on page 289, I don't believe in fate, nor do I believe in some ridiculous cauldron.
Famous last words. That will bite you in the ass.
Yes, it will.
So let's go back to the original question that you asked, Amy.
What makes Feyre choose to fight and to go back to Prythian?
I'm going to say her family.
Yeah, I'm going to say her family reminds her that she has a lot to live for and desire, and she has desires that she has a right to have. And she wants to fight for that. She's not fighting things in the woods anymore. Mm-hmm. She's thriving.
Thrive, not survive.
And it's not Tamlin. It's her and what she wants for herself that she fights for.
And I think it's really great to have this clarity and realization going into future episodes because, you know, I know when I read it the first time, it was like, damn, girl, you are putting yourself through hell for a guy. And she's not. She's doing it for herself. So we are happy to see it. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be exploring chapters 33 through 37 of A Court in Thorns and Roses.
We would love to continue today's conversation with you. You can email us at booktalkforbooktalk@gmail.com or find us on TikTok and Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk.
Bye.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.